PolyAnagrams is a game in which players create a crossword grid on an ordinary table. It goes beyond every other tile-based tabletop crossword game in that there are 9 different ways of modifying existing words and 6 ways that they can be moved when they are blocking the placement of a new word. In this video, I will discuss each of these techniques in detail. A unique feature of PolyAnagrams is the bone pile, which is a collection of letters that are face up and that are available to the players on every turn. It starts out with 7 letters, but always grows much larger by the middle of the game as players continuously take existing words apart and discard unneeded ones. In this example, the next player will have a total of 24 letters to work with, 7 on their letter rack and another 17 in the bone pile. This is the same grid 12 turns later when the game ended. Only 3 of the words shown in the previous image were still in the grid. All of the others had been modified or cannibalized for their letters. The motto of the game is, in PolyAnagrams, no word is forever, not even forever. You can lay down your most elegant word, only to see it being dismantled by the very next player. Notice that in this example, the player discarded the 3 letters with yellow highlighting. That symbolizes the behavior in the animations that you'll be seeing. Discarded letters will drop out of sight below the bottom of the screen, into the bone pile, even as new letters, shown here in red, rise upward from both the bone pile and the player's letter racks. It's not too much to say that the bone pile is what sets PolyAnagrams apart from everything else that has gone before it in the genre of tile-based tabletop crossword games. In fact, it is precisely the bone pile that enables players to create the very long words that characterize the game. In this section, I'll start by describing the 2 powerful moves that give PolyAnagrams its depth. The first one is the Rebuild a Word move. Notice that the player rebuilds the word latch on the same junction letter, C, after discarding the unneeded letters and importing the ones that they did need for their new word, scoured. The second one is the Cannibalize a Word move. It works just like the Rebuild a Word move, except that you create your new word on a different junction letter. Here the player is cannibalizing the existing word catch. Notice that they only discarded the letter T. After bringing in the needed letters, they slid the string to the left to connect them to the new junction letter B, forming the new word bachelor. Let's move on to the PolyAnagrams maneuvers. They do not in themselves create new words. You use them to move existing words that are blocking the placement of your new word to a different part of the crossword grid. In this case, the player wanted to place a new word on the N in renovate, but it was blocked by the existing word stereo. So they slid the free letter tiles of stereo along renovate until they came to rest on another letter E. Then they built the new word ponder on the N. Here the plan was to build a new word downward from the C in the existing word, ironic. The letters of the existing word in turn made that impossible. So the player used a perpendicular slider maneuver to shift the entire word ironic across the word intern to the right. That put the target letter C into the clear for attachment of the new word crane. The compound slider maneuver combines both parallel and perpendicular movements. In this example, the target was the I in the existing word audacity. The player first discarded the letter L from the existing word volatile. Next, they slid the V, O, L, T, and I downward by 2 letters, coming to rest on a new junction letter I. They slid the word retains upward and moved the O into the gap to complete the new word volition. When a word in the grid is blocking placement of your new word, you can simply move it out of the way. In this example, the target for the new word was the E in space, but the word calf was in the way. The player used the Relocate a Word maneuver to move the free letters of calf from their junction letter C in the word space to a new junction letter C in scarf. That made room for attachment of the new word lever. You may also move groups of words. In this case, the target letter was the P in stop, but it was blocked by the word once and its 2 connected words. So the player moved the group from their junction letter O in stop to a new junction letter O in flow. The letter P was then available for attachment of their new word primed. Whenever you move words from one part of the grid to another, you will often need to change them between horizontal and vertical orientations. In this example, the target letter for the new word was the R in largest, but the letter T in the word feast was in the way. The player simply moved both feast and its connected word, agency, to the S in largest. Notice how they transpose the orientations of both words. The R in largest was then available for attachment of the new word, prose. In PolyAnagrams, there are also 3 bonus moves that allow you to create and score 2 words in a single turn. With the Lengthen a Word bonus move, you place a letter onto either end of an existing word in such a way as to turn it into a new word, and then you build another word on that letter. You score both words. In this example, the player placed an S at the beginning of upper to turn it into the new word supper, and then built on the S to form a second new word, start. Another way to create 2 words in the same turn is to replace one letter in an existing word and then create a new word on the letter that you just inserted. In this case, the player substituted a letter P for an R in the target word charter, thereby changing it into chapter. Then they built the bonus word specimen on the P. You may also create a new word by inserting a letter into an existing word. In this obsolete animation, the player chose to insert the N of clean into waiter to turn it into wander. Under the finalized rules, they would have continued by building a bonus word on either the C, the L, or the E. Next, I'll show you 3 powerful ways to harvest letters from words that are already in your grid. In each case, the letters that you leave behind must spell a word that has not yet appeared during the game without being rearranged. Any letters that you don't use go into the bone pile. With the Get a Needed Letter move, you detach an existing word and then reattach it on a copy of the letter that you need. In this case, the player needed an E, so they targeted the existing word refine, which had 2 of them. First, they attached a copy of the junction letter, R, to the first E in extremes. Then they detached the last 4 letters of the source word and used them to rebuild it in its new location. The original E was left over for their use during the rest of their turn. You may also harvest letters from one or both ends of an existing word. In this example, the player snitched the letters A and L from the end of rational and used them to build the new word, glance. With the very powerful shrink a word technique, you may pluck any number of letters from anywhere in an existing word. Here the player condensed the word flounder into the new word founder and used the L in creating the new word pledge. You may often have to remove more letters than you need in order to leave a valid new word behind. That's all right. Simply discard the ones that you don't need into the bone pile. However, a major rule in PolyAnagrams is that if you shrink a word that has 10 letters or more, your new word must have at least 10 letters. The idea is to keep some letters tied up in the grid in order to move the game along. And finally, let's take a look at 2 special techniques that don't fit into any of the other categories. It sometimes happens that you will lay down a word that forms one side of a square. In this example, which was played on the theme water bodies, the word was brazos. It scored 6 points. But since each side of the square was 5 letters long, the player also earned 5 bonus points for completing the square. The total for the turn was therefore 11 points. Once a square has been created, the bonus points make it a natural target for later turns. The challenge is that your new word must match 2 letters that are a certain distance apart. In this example, the words brazos at the top and newer on the bottom are the easiest targets, since they don't have any other words attached to them. An anagram is a word that is formed by rearranging all of the letters of an existing word, adding none and taking none away. Here the player anagrams voter into overt, scoring 5 extra points. They still got to take their turn as usual. Many times a word, especially a short one, will have more than one anagram. It's amazing how they can sometimes lie there for several turns, in plain sight, without being noticed. In this example, If your opponent doesn't see the opportunity to play Trove, you can pick it up on your next turn. This is important because a few points from a single anagram may determine the winner of the entire game. I suggest that you learn as many anagrams as you can. You'll find many hundreds of them in a document that is linked in the description section below. This little table shows just 13 of its 672 lines. The red underlining shows words that even Microsoft Excel didn't recognize. You'll also have the opportunity there to hit the like and subscribe button so that YouTube will make PolyAnagrams more visible. I would be personally grateful if you would comment on what you think of the game. Many thanks for watching.